I think we're live. Hello. No matter how many times I do this, I always question if I did it right. I guess one way to find out, right? I'll just start and then we'll see if people join on and start asking questions. That's the default plan here, folks. So, hello, random tangents aside. Welcome to the celebratory live stream because I did it. I posted all 14 SIBO mistakes in 14 days. I had made a post on the community a while back, maybe a couple of days ago, but I have been editing my videos again for the first time in a while. I had an editor for a little while there, and I've been having a little bit of fun with it. I've been trying to insert little bits of my sense of humor and little bits of like memes and GIFs and clips from TV shows and K-pop songs that I like. So I hope you enjoy the new editing style in the last, 15 or 16 videos. But that being said, it was a lot of work. I was frequently editing those videos the night before they went live. So I'm very proud of myself that I did it. Pat on the back for me. Hooray for me. And I thought it would be just a fun kind of celebration thing to hop on here and do a YouTube live stream. So here we are. So my curiosity is, did I cover everything you ever needed to know about SIBO? I mean, I think I did. That's kind of the point of it, is I designed it to be like kind of the SIBO Bible in a way. But I'm curious if anybody has deep burning questions remaining about SIBO, and thus we're doing the SIBO mistakes SIBO Q&A live stream. So let me see. Let's see. Try to get the hang of this interface here because I don't go live all that much, if I'm being honest here. Hmm. I can't tell. Oh, no, there are some people watching. Okay, so I must be doing it right. So, any questions about SIBO? Until I get a question come in, I'm just gonna tell you things that I think you ought to know. Um, so if you haven't watched the SIBO Mistakes series, by the way, A, you should totally do it, and B, there might be spoilers. So, spoiler alert. But oh, oh shoot. Did I? Oh, there was a thing that I thought I was supposed to click on and it brought me to a different tab. So I thought I killed the live stream. So again, spoiler alert for the SIBO Mistake series if you haven't watched them all yet. But I think a really big recurring theme for that series, the new version of the series, is that the diagnosis of SIBO might not matter nearly as much as we think it does. So whether you have the diagnosis or you suspect that you have that diagnosis, it might not matter tremendously because it really still boils down to, come on, kids, you can say it with me. I've said it a million times on this channel, building a SIBO-proof body, building a healthy, strong, resilient body that can handle stressors and microbes and challenges through this journey we call life. So that was a big recurring theme for the new iteration of SIBO Mistakes. Actually, and while I'm waiting for some questions to come in, I'm going to pay a little bit of um, a little bit of a nod to the original SIBO Mistake series, because that was actually one of the first things that I did here on YouTube. I started working with SIBO in my clinic, and I kind of saw the same recurring things happening again and again where people were getting stuck. And so the original SIBO Mistakes that started airing in 2017, I know we were all babies then. That was sort of this like, I would post them as they occurred to me. Like, I would see the same mistake pop up again and again, and then I would follow that moment of inspiration and I would post it. But by the time I got done with the series, especially recently, I realized that the order was kind of all over the place. Um, I think that the series as it stands now is much better because I really go in order of least important to most important, with number one, SIBO mistake number one being the most important. So that was part of the reason why I changed it and why I wanted to upload the new version. Part of it too is that I no longer agree with some of the things that I said in that original series. I had a whole video about how gluten could be a SIBO mistake and gluten is going to cause leaky gut for everybody no matter what. Gluten's evil. And therefore, if you're eating gluten, you're never going to heal from SIBO. And I have disproven old Nikki's theory so many times at this point that I put that video to sleep quite a while ago on my channel. But that's just one example of, I started realizing that I've learned, I've grown, I've gotten better as a clinician and a coach and a nutritionist. And I've just seen some of the gaps or some of the mistakes that I made, ironically, in the SIBO mistake series, again, in the original iteration of this. So I wanted to start with a clean slate, make the series as good and concise and accurate and helpful as humanly possible. And that's what the new version of SIBO Mistakes is. So if you notice that there was a couple of videos that made it into the original series, but not this new series, that is by design. I went through and I chose what topics still made sense and which ones I wanted to add into the mix. Oh, look, we have our first comment. Hi, thank you for all the info. Can the specific low carb diets cause malnutrition and weakness? Yeah, certainly. Now, keep in mind the kind of traditional dietetic definition of malnutrition is going to be a little different than what I'm going to describe as malnutrition. But um, basically, it's you can have a hard time nourishing yourself and you can have a hard time getting all of the vitamins and minerals and energy like ATP from a restricted diet. So I am of the opinion, and I have seen clinically that any restricted diet can lead to malnutrition and potentially something like weakness, especially if you're cutting calories as a consequence of that. That's actually one of my biggest pet peeves. New series. SIBO pet peeves. Oh my god, and then I could out all of the all of the SIBO experts that tell you all this bullshit. That might be like a slightly different flavor of the SIBO mistake series. Maybe I'll do that at some point. Um, but one of my ultimate SIBO clinical pet peeves is that the functional medicine, integrative, naturopathic, etc. space is so willy-nilly putting people on these diets, and I will confess, I did this very briefly in the beginning too, and they're not following through and doing the real nutritional counseling to make sure that people are getting the nourishment they need. And I mean, the bare bones minimum for that is calories, right? Like, how hard would it be to just ensure that people are getting enough calories with their restrictive diet? That would be super easy, but nobody does it. And again, I know because like I didn't do it in the beginning either, let alone you get into, is this person on the restricted diet getting enough thiamine or riboflavin or vitamin K or whatever the case may be? So to answer your question, sorry, it took me a minute to get there. I would say yes, absolutely. Um, the more you are restricting, the easier it is to become malnourished and to inadvertently drop your calorie intake, which is going to oftentimes lead to top two symptoms I see: fatigue and weight loss. Unintentional weight loss is one of those danger signals or red flags that I talked about in one of these SIBO mistakes. I see it super commonly, and both the online forums and so-called SIBO experts really don't appear to give a rat's ass when you're dropping weight unintentionally, and they absolutely should. In any other setting in the healthcare profession, unintentional weight loss is a tremendous red flag, and for some reason, it's just super normal and okay in the SIBO world, but it's not okay. I will say too, I've actually seen numerous people who come in not only complaining of unintentional weight loss and fatigue, but also brain fog. And I've seen numerous people come into me with brain fog and they're convinced that it's the SIBO or they're convinced it's the candida. Like, oh, the candida is giving me brain fog. But in actuality, it's just that they are underfueled. And I shit you not, cross my heart, hope to die. I've seen so many of these cases with fatigue and brain fog, and I give them the simple instruction to eat more, even if it's just eating more of the same foods that you currently eat. Just eat more and get adequate calories. And I've seen the symptom of brain fog turn around in a matter of like a week or two, just from eating more food. No fancy candida supplements, no SIBO antimicrobials, no histamine, whatever. It's just your brain doesn't have enough food. And that's all there is to it. So, yeah, so weakness, fatigue, brain fog, unintentional weight loss, and I'll throw into the mix too, hormone imbalances can be directly attributable to undereating or possibly even under-consuming carbs. Um, Now it's kind of ironic because my husband's gearing up to do like low carb, high fat right now for some stuff that he's working on. But so I think that there is a time and a place for keto and keto-esque diets, but they're way overused and abused. And I think that a lot of women struggle to cut their carbs as severely as I see in this space too. So I've seen carb restriction really mess with thyroid hormones and cycling hormones, and women will have really funky, weird cycles or horrible PMS, or they just won't have a cycle at all, period. In that, pun not intended, but acknowledged. And then again, we get them eating more and eating more carbs specifically, and that can oftentimes correct hormone issues. The trick with hormones and the unfortunate thing with hormones as a woman is that it can take a solid 3 to 6 months to really see a huge change. I'm gonna sit down, by the way. I have a little bit. My left heel is giving me a little bit of heck these days, a little mild case of plantar fasciitis. So I was ambitious. I thought, oh, I'm gonna stand for my live stream the entire time. And as you can see, my left foot decided against that. Have no fear. I am arthritis, so this is gonna take me out by God. Oh, uh, okay. So the original person who asked about low carb diets causing malnutrition and weakness, again, resounding yes, said everything you just mentioned happened with my case, and I did not find out I wasn't getting enough calories. Doctor put me on antibacterials right after the diet, but I had to stop. Way too many symptoms. Yeah, I brought up this analogy a couple of times in SIBO mistakes, but it's this idea of like you're digging yourself a deeper hole, and a lot of very well-intentioned people will try to help you by giving you a shiny new shovel. They're trying to help, bless their hearts, but that's not helping. You don't need a new shovel. You don't need antimicrobials and stripping diets. You need to heal and nourish your body. And there's a really big difference between the two. So I'm sorry that happened to you, but honestly, I'm not surprised. This is why I will talk about this until the cows come home because I see it so commonly. Let's see. This is a sincere question, not a criticism. Oh gosh, I'm bracing myself now. Where are all the reviews from people who finished FODMAP Freedom? It's just really awkward to ask people to make a video testimonial. Like, I have it kind of gently at the end of the course, like, "Oh, BTW, if you would be so kind to do that." But I'm not really forcible with it. That's actually one of the things, like, on my business ownership side that I think I need to improve at, is how do you gracefully and not, like, weirdly ask people to leave you a testimonial? It's kinda weird. Also, there's only so many hours in the day. So I was telling my nutritionist, just like the nutritionist who works for me, to be clear, I was telling my employee the other day that I have like 3 or 4 video testimonials that people have sent to me on their own accord, and I just haven't put them on the FODMAP Freedom website. I just keep forgetting, and they're like sitting in a folder. So yeah, part of it is just like I personally have not figured out the mechanics of asking people to leave a testimonial. And that feels kinda weird and awkward to me, and then part of it is even when I get them, sometimes I forget to put them on the sales page for, like, a embarrassing amount of time. But the live streams that I do with the alumni whenever I'm opening FODMAP Freedom, those are kind of effectively testimonials, right? Like, they talk about the experience and how it helped them, and we get together and do live streams, so, those kinda count for something too, in my opinion, and that's easier and funner to do anyway. But yeah, I mean, valid question. Let's see. Pamela says, I can't figure out why I have digestive issues and food sensitivities. SIBO and parasite tests were always negative. Okay. If I'm not following a low FODMAP diet now, is your FODMAP freedom course beneficial? Yeah, that's actually a good question. It is. Yeah. Um, FODMAP freedom. See, here's the funny thing is that a lot of people enter my world and they decide to work with me because they kind of followed the SIBO path. And that's how they get to me oftentimes. Similarly, a lot of people are on the low FODMAP diet. So I picked the name FODMAP Freedom not because it's exclusively useful for people who are on the low FODMAP diet, but because it's just such a common thing in this like IBS, SIBO, tummy problem world. And I thought the name was cute. It's the alliteration. When I came up with the name, I was like, "Oh, that's amazing," and I just ran with it. So, in hindsight, I've had many people ask me that, like, "If I'm not doing low FODMAP, can I still do the course?" The answer is yes. It's really I've designed it in a way to cover all of the bases between IBS, dysbiosis, and SIBO. And again, it's like a Venn diagram that has a lot of overlap between those areas. But that's kind of the world that we swim around in. I've also helped people with IBD in that program, but there are certain flavors of IBD, namely ulcerative colitis, that I want to talk to those people first before they join. And I just want to make sure that we're staying safe and I'm staying in my lane. So I think that it can also help people with other conditions or diagnoses is just I a little bit more cautious with that crowd versus again IBS, dysbiosis, candida, leaky gut, SIBO, like that kind of stuff. The so-called functional GI stuff. Let's see. Keto made my microbiome more sensitive, I think. I took a Plan B pill when I was doing keto that gave me dysbiosis. Huh. And so I assume from that you mean it made your microbiome more sensitive in a bad way, right? Would you, if you're still here, would you care to elaborate on that? You mean more sensitive in a bad way, right? Like less resilient, less stable? That's how I'm interpreting that comment. Um, yeah, again, I think that there's a time and a place for keto and keto-esque diets. I think that there's a right and a wrong way to do every diet, though. So in the SIBO world, I'll start with this. We see low FODMAP done the wrong way all damn day. You are given the handout of here's the Allison Seebecker diet. And then you're sent off into the wild blue yonder, and your functional doctor does not follow up and does not monitor your nutrition or your calories or anything like that. And you're just hacking stuff out, and you're not given a plan on how the reintroductions are going to go and when that's going to happen. It's just these foods are now bad for you. Never look at a Brussels sprout again. Um, Back in the day, which I would call like the rise of paleo. So think 2012, 2013, 2014, in that era of nutritional um, understanding when paleo was really popular. I was pretty paleo leaning. I was never 100% paleo. I would still like eat white rice if I went to get Thai food or something, but I was pretty paleo. And I followed a lot of that sort of world at the time. And I remember even then thinking, there's a right way and a wrong way to do paleo. If you are making almond flour cupcakes and almond flour brownies and almond flour pancakes and almond flour whatevers, and you're eating that all the damn time, and everything is encased in bacon, right? Each individual spear of asparagus is individually wrapped with its own piece of bacon. And like everything is drizzled with bacon fat. That, in my opinion, is the wrong way to do paleo. You could do paleo where you really emphasize like healthy proteins and healthy fats and like vegetables and greens, and that would be arguably a healthier way. Um, to keep picking on other people, vegan and vegetarian diets, again, a right and a wrong way to do that. You could stay vegan and you could eat, 10 grams of jarred frosting, and that's technically vegan, but is that healthy? Right. So, similar to that, I think that with low carb and keto diets, there's a right way and a wrong way, or there's a right way and a common way. 99% of the people that I see are doing it the wrong way. And it's not a criticism. It's hard to do this when you also have relationships and responsibilities and a job and a family and a whatever. Um, but I think that keto should be really plant forward, just obviously not the starchier plants. It should be very plant forward. And a lot of people also overdo protein technically if they really want to do keto. So um, I don't know what he's up to these days. I think he's kind of pivoted more towards carnivore, truthfully. But back like 5+ years ago, I always thought that Mike Mutzel was a good example of somebody who did keto the right way. Um, but again, I think he's kind of pivoted nowadays, so I don't know if I can recommend his stuff anymore. But yeah, for what it's worth. So if you were doing keto the way that it's commonly used these days, my guess is that you were maybe overdoing things like fat bombs and butter in the coffee and just overloading yourself with fat, but maybe not necessarily getting enough fiber and plant diversity to keep your microbiome healthy. That's my point. But again, you're not alone in that. I've seen people do the wrong or the common folk way of doing diets a million times, and I'm guilty of it too. I was a vegetarian for 11 years of my life, I think. Yeah, the age of 11 to 22, I was a vegetarian, and I ate a lot of Frankenfood. Like veggie burgers that pretended to be real hamburgers and, veggie dogs that pretended to be real hot dogs and that sort of modified hydrolyzed Frankenfood. So I'm guilty too. Let's see. Yeah. And yeah, so the original poster, I had asked her to elaborate and she confirmed, yeah, she meant more sensitive in the sense of less resilient. Yeah, that sucks. Again, my guess is that you probably didn't have the plant diversity or the fiber quantity in your diet to keep your microbiome healthy when you were doing keto. Keep in mind too, guys, this is something that I think I have a video on it, and I forget what title I picked because it was kind of clickbaity, honestly. The things you have to do if you're on YouTube. Um, but high fat diets, especially diets that are high in saturated fat, are consistently shown to cause leaky gut syndrome. So again, it's like I'm not knocking saturated fat and I'm not knocking keto, but you have to have the fiber quantity and the plant diversity to keep your microbiome healthy despite what you're doing to yourself for metabolic reasons. And most people don't do that. Let's see. Ivania says, "Hi, thank you for your work." You're welcome. I think I have a thiamine deficiency that causes various health issues, including digestive. Can you give us more info on mega dose thiamine treatment? Not really. Honestly, I don't super do it. I know I've had some people who felt that the fat soluble thiamine supplements were more beneficial for them. So think like benfotiamine and oh god, what's the other one? There's 2 versions that are fat soluble. But I've had a couple of people report that those were more helpful for them. Um, what I would encourage you to do is at least do a little bit of a Google search on foods that are rich in thiamine or foods that are high in thiamine. You don't want to be the person who's just taking the supplement and you're like, "This is good," and you're not eating foods with thiamine or at least making an effort to do so. Um, and also you're gonna get, like, other cofactors and cool stuff with food. So, you could certainly try a thiamine supplement, and I have seen it help some people. I don't know about mega dosing, but, certainly, like, a couple of capsules a day of the fat-soluble stuff has been helpful for a few people I've worked with. Yeah. But always go back to the root of the root, which is presumably nutritional deficiency, because 'cause you're not getting enough in your diet. The other thing is that certain metabolic states will use a lot more thiamine and you'll burn through your thiamine more quickly, and that can create deficiency. So theoretically, you could be eating a normal amount of thiamine in your diet, which again, I'm questioning, but you could, in theory, eat a normal amount of thiamine. But then if you were working out super duper duper hard, or if you were pregnant or nursing, or if you had a super, super like freaky high carb diet, those things can deplete your thiamine quite a bit, and your need for thiamine might be above and beyond what the normal RDA would suggest. So I find that oftentimes it's the simple unsexy answer of you just don't eat the foods with thiamine. And it's as simple as that. But sometimes you hear the stories of like people. I remember I had one lady, she got into figure posing, which for those of you who don't know, I hope I don't insult people. I'm gonna do a really bad job, explaining this, but it's the thing where you see people and they're, like, wicked ripped, and they have spray tan, and they're wearing, like, a thong bikini, and they get up on stage, and they do the big muscly poses in stiletto high heels, and it's figure posing. But they have to get super shredded and lean to be able to do that because you basically don't want any molecule of fat on your entire body. For the record, I do not condone this. I think it's horrible for you. But I remember I worked with somebody who that was part of her root cause story is that she got into figure posing and she was eating chicken, like no skin, fat free chicken breast, plain ass broccoli, and plain ass white rice. And she ate only those things for months and months and months and months, and she was working out like a crazy person, dropped a ton of weight, got really shredded, and she basically destroyed her metabolism, and then started having tummy problems. But one of the things that we ended up talking about with her was, "Hey, You were over exercising and overexerting yourself and dropping a ton of weight, and she was eating quite a lot of just plain white rice as part of that strict diet. Maybe you need more thiamine, and that was one of the things that helped her. So sometimes you hear a little bit of both come up. But again, she also clearly wasn't eating foods with thiamine if she was restricting herself to only those 3 foods. So it's usually both. Good question, though. Let's see. Melody says, I'm on probiotics while I wait to join your FODMAP Freedom course. Ooh, I'll look forward to meeting you then. Is that okay for now? Yeah, I think that's fine. One of the SIBO mistakes that I just posted in this new series is about how probiotics have repeatedly been demonstrated to help alleviate symptoms or normalize breath tests in SIBO. And Lord knows that there's even more research in the IBS SIBO or the IBS dysbiosis kind of space, be above and beyond the SIBO thing. So yeah, that's fine. Especially if you seem like you tolerate it okay, I would just leave it and just be happy with it. If you think that it's working well for you and you notice a positive difference, I would definitely keep it in. And honestly, even going through FODMAP Freedom, I might recommend that you keep that same probiotic if you feel that it's been beneficial for you and it's made a positive impact on your symptoms. So yeah, keep it in. Oh, sorry, your next message literally said they seem to help alleviate symptoms. Sorry. I should have read both simultaneously before I commented, I guess. Yeah, I would keep it in then. That's fine. When we get to the stage in FODMAP Freedom where we do the probiotic speed dating, you can make the decision if you want to stop the one that you're on currently, or if you just want to leave that probiotic as is, and then you're adding and subtracting my probiotics for the speed dating on top of that. There's no law stating that you're not allowed to take multiple probiotics. I mean, obviously, from a cost perspective, you want to minimize cost and take fewer pills, but if it's helping, I would just leave it alone, honestly. Let's see. Ben says, I have hydrogen SIBO, low pancreatic elastase, abnormal sucrose breath test, but I've gained 20 pounds. Any ideas? Um, Yeah, so there's 2 things, and I made a video years ago about gaining weight unintentionally with SIBO and some theories about that. Weight loss is far more common. As I said, just when you restrict and you're on a hard diet, it's really hard to just get calories in. But that being said, um, and you would think that the low pancreatic elastase would also be more prone to have you lose weight, not gain. My best guess is that there's some component of like leaky gut, metabolic endotoxemia kind of stuff where the dysbiosis or the SIBO is such that you're making your gut lining permeable, and then that's freaking out your immune system. And you have all of this nice inflammation as a consequence of that. And then inflammation can either mess with your metabolism and mess with insulin sensitivity, and that could cause you to gain real actual fat. Or the inflammation can make you puffy and can make you retain water, and it could be water weight, or it could be a combination of both. You hear about the water weight thing sometimes when you talk to people and they're like, "Oh, I did a whole 30 and I lost 20 pounds the first week." You didn't lose 20 pounds of fat, right? Like, that's impossible. Um, you lost a lot of water weight because you were so massively inflamed. You were holding on to extra water, and you were holding on to that, and you released it when you went on an anti-inflammatory diet. So yeah, it's up for grabs if you've gained 20 pounds of fat or water weight, or if it's a combo of both. But my guess is that there's some tie-in with inflammation, leaky gut, endotoxemia, that kind of stuff. Let's see. Okay, so Melody's the one who was asking about the probiotics. So we're gonna say hi to her again. She said also, I don't have a gallbladder. May it rest in peace. Which I learned could cause SIBO. Maybe. Not diagnosed yet. Waiting to take a test. Oh, I wouldn't bother with a SIBO test. Honestly, like that was my number one SIBO mistake, was putting way too much emphasis on or faith in the diagnosis of SIBO. Breath tests suck pretty badly. So honestly, I would save yourself the hassle and the couple $100. I wouldn't even do the test. But the question itself is, should I take ox bile? Yeah, I would certainly try it. I think for folks who lost their gallbladder, I have seen ox bile be helpful before. Um, Another sort of strategy too that sounds counterintuitive, but I'll share it, is that when you have a gallbladder, so your liver is making bile all the time. And normally you get a slow trickle of bile release from your liver, and then it gets stored and concentrated in the gallbladder. And then the gallbladder can decide, for lack of a better word, your gallbladder can decide when it needs to release a couple of squirts of the good stuff, right? And it does so around mealtime. When you remove the gallbladder, not only are you no longer concentrating the bile, right? You're not collecting those drips and concentrating it, but you're also not getting the intentional squirts of concentrated bile. Instead, what happens is your liver is still producing bile. It's just a slow trickle all the time. So that could mean that you might need extra supplemental bile during your meals, which is where you were going with the ox bile comment. And I think that that is worth trying. Yes. The other thing sometimes I have people experiment with, especially if they have diarrhea based symptoms, is you might try a little bit of activated charcoal in between your meals because that slow drip of bile in between meals isn't supposed to happen normally, and you can use a binder like charcoal or maybe clay or something and try to bind up a little bit of that extra bile, and that could sort of help again, specifically with diarrhea-based symptoms. So that's also a consideration is that I would try the ox bile with meals first, but if you're having diarrhea, I would consider using one of those cheap binders. Don't buy, like, the super expensive $60 bottles of Super Elite Binder Plus or whatever brand is out there nowadays. Like, charcoal and clay are so cheap. We do not need to spend $60 a bottle on some proprietary stupid ass blend of binders. Just that's another pet peeve for the new series. Um, yeah, what dose? I don't know. It depends on the person. So sometimes I will start people off on a low dose ox bile product. There's one from Biotics Research called Beta Plus. It's ox bile and a little bit of beet, and I forget, there's maybe 1 or 2 other ingredients, but it's pretty low dose, it's a tablet, so sometimes I'll start people low and just work our way up with that. There's another one that's much higher strength from Jarrow that I've used before. I think it's called Bile Acid Factors. It's quite a bit higher dose though, so I would probably start with a half a capsule, just open it up, dump out half, seal it back up. I would start lower with that and then play with it. And I think for that product, 1 capsule per meal usually does the trick for people. Um, Again, if you even need something that high dose, I'd probably start with something lower though. Let's see. Oh, and then she said, I know breath tests are iffy, but need to have that in order to get antibiotics. I have GERD and antimicrobials may be too harsh. Yeah, but I guess that's another point is that you might not need antimicrobials or antibiotics. I personally hardly use antimicrobials with SIBO, and that's in my private work and in FODMAP freedom. So it's up to you. You know, it's your journey. You do you. But I personally have the opinion that we could probably get you feeling quite a bit better without the breath test and without the antimicrobials or the antibiotics. So, but sometimes they can be helpful. I'm not. There's enough people who have had a positive experience with rifaximin or the antimicrobials. I'm not going to knock them entirely. Let's see. Wilson said, "What do you think about Vibrant Health's gut zoomer?" Good question. Going back to my roots of the stool testing, it's okay. That test is a combination of 16S and PCR. The big thing that I don't there, so there's two main things that I don't like about that test and why I personally don't use it. Number one, it drives me absolutely apeshit mad that they have a section on a stool test that claims to give you a SIBO pattern or a SIBO diagnosis. That is not scientifically founded. I don't care what the GI map and the gut zoomer people tell you. You cannot diagnose SIBO via a stool test. You can't diagnose SIBO based on what's coming out your rectum. That's not a thing. And I've debunked that long ago on this channel. So that is one reason why I personally don't use the gut zoomer. Ooh, hold on. Water delivery. Thanks, dear. Hydrate people. So that's one thing I don't like. The other thing is that they have their own ranges, and if I remember correctly, I think that they give it to you like they don't give you the raw number. They don't tell you, "Oh, your akkermansia was 3.289 times 10 to the whatever power number of microbes counted." They don't do that. They give you their own weird ass ranges and they plot it against like all of the results that they have seen and what they deem to be normal. And then they give you this stupid, worthless little bar. And I don't like that. I want to see the numbers, the percentages, something, and then I want to make that deduction myself. So that's the other reason why I don't like that test. Um, yeah, good question though. Um, uh, somebody with the screen name Faye said, "Keep up the good work. We appreciate your efforts." That's so sweet. Thank you. I will. Don't worry. I'm not going anywhere. I had to take a little bit of a breather in the fall, but I'm back. Can lack of bile cause constipation? Yes. That was actually something I was going to share a little while ago with the ox bile conversation, but I forgot. Yes, I have seen constipation be very much helped by ox bile supplementation. Yes, repeatedly. Actually, I had one patient. So we started her on ox bile and we had a positive improvement. And then I followed up with her a couple weeks later and she kind of nonchalantly mentioned that she was having liquid diarrhea. And I was like, whoa, that's new. Wow, we need to talk about that. And we basically talked about it and came to the conclusion that she was overdosing on ox bile, but she confessed that she had had bad enough constipation for long enough that she actually liked having diarrhea because she was, like, assured that she was cleaned out every day, and so she was knowingly overdosing herself on ox bile. I share that because I think it proves the point that ox bile and, like, TUDCA and that sort of stuff can promote bowel movements and motility, um, but it's a whole 'nother can of worms getting into the medically induced PTSD and the stuff that was going on with her that led her to that and thinking that that was okay. So, I won't go into too much more detail. Ooh, is there a good binder that doesn't contribute to constipation? Yeah. Yeah, probably not. I think all binders are probably gonna be binding, at least as far as I can tell. I think that charcoal would be the least egregious. I think clay is gonna be pretty bad from a constipation standpoint. So if you really feel like you need to do a binder for whatever reason, maybe like mold detoxing, for example, I'd probably try charcoal first. The other thing is depending on the reasoning of why you're trying a binder. Again, like if you were exposed to super bad mold and you really need to do binders, maybe even prescription binders to help detox that mold, depending on the circumstances and how necessary the binder is, I would personally be open-minded to taking a mild herbal laxative to keep your bowels moving, just so that you can get the binder in for a couple of months and do the detoxing that you need to do. Now again, if you're doing binders for like SIBO dysbiosis kind of stuff or because the internet told you to, I probably wouldn't recommend band-aiding with laxatives just so that you can get the binder in. But again, like there is a time and a place for binders and mold mycotoxin detoxification is one of those areas. My mom was exposed to really bad mold years ago at her workplace, and she had to do a lot of like glutathione and sauna and binders, and it did help her, but it was pretty bad workplace exposure to mold for her. So that's a good example of you need to do the binders, and you can actually band aid some other stuff to make sure that you can do what you need to do. Good question, though. I wish I knew of one that was good for the constipation kind of perspective. Mm, what's my recipe? I like that you put in quotes. What is my recipe for leaky gut healing using L-glutamine, zinc, carnosine, and glycine? Amounts of each. I don't know if I have a recipe per se. For L-glutamine, the dosing range is super wide. You could take as little as 3 grams per day or as much as like 30 or 40 grams per day. That's kind of a pain in the butt, and most people don't want to take that much. So I find that with me, when I use L-glutamine, I probably have people hover closer to the 10 gram per day mark. Um, and for the one that I'm thinking of right now, I usually have used Claire. I think they're all the same though. I don't have allegiances to that one, but I think one scoop is 5 grams if I remember correctly. So you could do a scoop mixed with water and take that 2 or maybe 3 times a day if you wanna do slightly higher, and that seems to do the trick. So, yeah, I'm moderate. Like, I'm not on the lower end, but I'm also not at the tip top end for the L-glutamine conversation. Hydrate. Sorry. I should probably lean away from the microphone so you don't have to hear me glugging. But yeah, so that's that. Zinc carnosine, I used to be more keen on zinc carnosine, and I've shied away from it in recent years. And that's just because iron deficiency is so freaking common in this population. And if zinc and iron are 2 minerals that compete with each other for absorption. Also, you can throw into the mix copper, calcium, and magnesium. All 5 of those muck with each other. So if you superdose one of them, you're possibly gonna inhibit the absorption of the others. So I was at a place for a few years there where I was having people do 1 capsule of zinc carnosine 3 or even 4 times a day. I have since backed off, and if I use zinc carnosine at all, I try to have people take it at a meal that does not contain a lot of iron. So if you know that you're gonna have steak for dinner, maybe don't take it with dinner, take it with lunch instead, and I'll usually just do 1 capsule per day if I use it at all. I think based on the minerals competing with each other, I'd almost rather do more glutamine and skip the zinc carnosine, even though I know it works. It's just I don't wanna make the iron deficiency that much worse. So, and then glycine, it sort of depends on the person. Some people could do glycine no problem, and some people get kinda neurological weirdness from it. So I start pretty conservative. Maybe I don't know, maybe like I get the powder usually, or it's granules. Now has one that I've gotten before, but I usually start people off with like a quarter or a half a teaspoon, and then maybe eventually we'd get up to like a teaspoon. I don't remember how many grams that would end up being, but if you look up the now glycine, they call it powder, but it's kind of a granulated thing. If you look that up, that'll give you a rough ballpark. Um, I'm personally more inclined to have people work collagen and collagen peptides into their diet and use it more like a food thing as opposed to getting glycine as a supplement. If I'm using glycine as a supplement, it's almost always because I want to help the person sleep and not necessarily for leaky gut purposes. But you could pretty easily mix the glycine powder in with the glutamine powder and take them together. And glycine actually tastes nice, it's sweet. So it's not a bad thing to take. It's just I tend to lean more towards collagen peptides and collagen kind of stuff, and then it's more of like a food thing versus a supplement thing. Let's see. Nancy said, "Hello, just checking in and listening." Yeah, that's what I call sponge mode. So, when we'll do our FODMAP Freedom live Q&As and we're talking, sometimes I'll call on people if I don't hear from them and, just ask like, "Hey, Juan, like, do you have any questions?" I picked on Juan yesterday, and, and then, sometimes they're like, "No, no, I'm just listening," and that's what we affectionately call sponge mode, and that's totally fine. But I do try to check with people and see if they have questions. So, it's fine, Nancy. Sponge away. Let's see. I get acid reflux when eating any kind of plant oil. Ooh, even if it's extra virgin olive oil, but I don't get it when I eat pork fat or beef tallow. Weird. I have no theory on that. And part of it is I would not claim to be an acid reflux expert myself. Um, Actually, hold on. I'm gonna grab you a PubMed ID because actually I just thought of this. I might have a theory for you. I surprised myself. Hold on. Not an acid reflux expert, my foot. Hold on. After reflux. This one. I'm pulling up a PowerPoint from Banish the Burn. Forgive me. Hang tight for just a minute. Okay. Okay. I'm close. I'm so close. Did I not save the damn PubMed ID? I'm so sorry that this is boring for everybody else. I'm so sorry. Just give me a second. I know I usually put PubMed IDs in the damn PowerPoints. This. Here we go. Okay. So this is a paper. I'm 99% sure this is correct. This is a paper that I've only seen it done once, and I have not seen any sort of follow-up. It was a 2018 paper. I believe it was done in Italy, and I don't remember truthfully if the PDF that I don't remember if I was able to find it in English or if I had to do, like, Google Translate to it. I think I used Google Translate for this one, but I found um, one article, and it's titled, if you wanna look it up, "New Food Approaches to Reduce and or Eliminate Increased Gastric Acidity Related to Gastroesophageal Pathologies." I'm pretty sure this is it. So, what they did, it was a really neat paper, and I hope that they follow up with it at some point. What they did was they had a group of people with I forget if it was GERD or gastritis. I think it was gastritis. Hold on. All right, hold on. Let's see. No, it was GERD and GORD. Um, what's it called? So they had groups. So what they did was they had a group. They did the Mediterranean diet, and there was no change in symptoms. Then they did Mediterranean diet, but they cut out acidic foods, so tomato, lemon, vinegar, that sort of stuff, and their symptoms got better. Not surprising. Then they went back to Mediterranean for the washout period, and their symptoms returned to baseline. Because again, the Mediterranean diet alone in the study did not help with their symptoms. So they were using it as kind of like a baseline or a washout diet. Then they did Mediterranean, but they basically removed any foods that would have plant-based oils. And there was this compound that they talked about, and I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's either pronounced glycid or glycide. You'll see it when you get the paper. But this glycid or this glycide compound, I've never heard it talked about. I looked on PubMed, like nobody else is talking about this, but it's when they are processing plant oils, it's it's a byproduct of the deodorizing process in plant oils, and it's present in basically every plant oil, particularly, palm oil. It was the most egregious. So, they had people do basically the Mediterranean diet minus foods that would contain, like, palm shortening and Crisco and plant oils, and their symptoms improved. So then they did Mediterranean again, and their symptoms returned to baseline for the washout period. Then they did Mediterranean minus this glycide or this glycid compound. Plus, they had the people intentionally eat more tomatoes, vinegar, and lemon, and their symptoms were still better. So cool. So cool. What you do to regain tolerance for this glycid or glycides, that I don't know, but it was very interesting, and I've never heard it talked about before. So for people who aren't aware of that, that could be valuable information. Let me see if I could just get the name of. Let me get the spelling of that compound really quick. Hold on. Da, da, da. Yes. So the spelling of that compound is Glycid. Glycid, I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, so hopefully that helps. Look, the so-called non-GERD, not a GERD expert found something useful. So I think that maybe is what's going on. I don't know how to remedy it though. Let's see. Da, 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 da. Okay, Wilson says, had chronic fatigue when taking caprylic acid 2 times per meal, was feeling good at first and less pain, but then I got chronic fatigue, so I stopped. Not sure if it's die off or not. Keep going. I would probably keep going, but I would go slower. So I would start at like half the dose that you were at, and I would do that for maybe a week or two, and then gradually bump it up. You might also consider adding in other anti-candida antimicrobials that are a little bit less die-offy. I wouldn't say caprylic acid is terrible for die-off, but oh God, what's it called? It used to be called Formula SF722. One of the dumber names imaginable, but it's super easy to remember and type out. If you Google that right now. You'll still pull it up on the Thorne website, but it's undecylinic acid. It's these little gel capsules. That stuff is really good for candida purposes, and it's really not die-offy. I haven't seen a person yet, to the best of my knowledge, who claimed that they had die-off from that particular anti-candida product, and it works well. So I would maybe even layer a little bit of that rather than cranking up the dose of the caprylic acid. You might just leave that at a lower dose and layer in something else. Let's see. I'm trying to find where I was. Let's see. YouTube, did you go out of order on me? Hold on. Okay. Somebody said they tested positive for methane SIMO. Yep, emo. I will say breath testing is more useful for methane. For hydrogen and hydrogen sulfide based stuff, I think it's a waste of time and money. For measuring methane output, it can be more useful. Here's the thing, I don't know if it matters where the methane overgrowth is. Like, we treat emo as emo, and it doesn't much matter if we think it's in the small intestine or the colon. But I think that there's a little bit more usefulness in doing a breath test for methane as opposed to the other two. And I think it's because the location really doesn't matter much. The whole idea with a breath test otherwise is to deduce the location. And the problem with breath testing is we can't make that claim unless we're doing what's called concurrent scintigraphy, which means we're basically X-raying you the whole time with a radioactive isotope in that lactulose or glucose. And then we could tell for sure when that substrate reaches your colon. Shy of doing that though, every breath test you do without X-rays following a radioactive isotope is pretty much worthless. But again, for emo, maybe some utility because we really don't care where the location the of the methanogens happens to be. Let's see. Is there value in mycotoxin testing? Um, I don't know. I haven't gotten far enough into that world. Um, I had the pleasure of hearing a really good mycotoxin mold lecture years ago. It was like 2019. I think it was right before the pandemic. Um, and it was Andrew Heyman, I think it was his name. He works with Richie Shoemaker. He's like the number 2 guy in the country next to Shoemaker himself in the mold department. He was pretty adamant that urine mycotoxin testing, so like the stuff you would get from Great Plains, for example, is utterly worthless and it's reflective of the mycotoxin and the mold that's on the food that you eat. Because, as a side note, guys, we are eating mold. There's mold on like corn and wheat and grains and some nuts and seeds and like cashews, and it's a part of being alive. And what you are excreting in urine is reflective of dietary intake, not environmental exposure. He was very dead set on that. Um, if you want to do testing, there's a whole panel of stuff. If you just do a Google search for CIRS, CIRS, um, blood panel or something like that. The Surviving Mold website has the details on all of the stuff, and they've got like VEGF and um, you know, transforming growth factor beta, and they have all of these fancy schmancy markers. I don't really do that very much. And I will say too that this guy who was talking about it, he also said that you're way better off testing the environment and doing something like an ERMI or having a professional come in and evaluate the home or the office. And you're better off finding the mold in your home because A, that's easier to do. And B, you got to find it and get rid of it anyway as part of the process. So he was pretty adamant that urine is useless in this case. If you want to do testing to confirm or deny the presence of mold, you're better off looking at the environment and trying to test and evaluate the environment. If you are going to do blood work, it would be more of like that big Sears panel that you could see online, but it's pretty expensive. So just, I don't do it. But I'm also not a mold person, so maybe that's why. Let's see. Somebody said, by the way, I'm gonna try to pick up the pace slightly because now everybody's throwing in questions. Now I'm falling behind on the chat a little bit. Um, I have hydrogen SIBO and low pancreatic elastase. I have gained weight. What is the reason for weight gain? So we talked about that briefly with somebody else. We had somebody with a similar situation, like SIBO and low pancreatic elastase, and he said, I think it was a man. Sorry if it wasn't. That they gained about 20 pounds. Basically, the theory that I proposed is that there's some interplay with leaky gut, endotoxemia, and inflammation, and the subsequent inflammation is either messing with your metabolism and messing with your insulin sensitivity directly, or it's causing you to retain water, and some of it is water weight, not fat weight. Or it could be a combination of both factors, but that's my best theory is that there's some linkage between the SIBO and or dysbiosis, leaky gut, and inflammation, and that's kinda how it's piecing together. But yeah, weight loss is far more common in this world. Somebody said, "I've tested positive for methane SIBO." Oh, same person, okay. "My current healthcare provider recommended gallbladder support supplements for my excess gas. Is this approach is not working. Your thoughts?" Well, I don't think you were gonna get rid of methane-based dysbiosis with one product anyway. Like, it almost doesn't matter that it's bile support. It's not anything against bile support, but I think that it was probably an oversimplistic approach if that's all they were doing with you. Um, that now and it could be that you're doing other stuff and you just were trying to keep it concise for the sake of the YouTube comments. Um, so forgive me if I'm making assumptions here, but yeah, I don't know if I would go to gallbladder immediately for methane personally. There's some good evidence. I talk about this in FODMAP freedom when we get to that section, but there's some good evidence that lack of diversity in the microbiome is what allows the methane producers to become overabundant and kind of take over that ecosystem. So I tend to focus a lot more on like prebiotics and fibers that can help suppress methane. In particular, PHGG, guar gum, sun fiber is fantastic for that. Um, I also really like the BioGaia Gastris, the chewable probiotic that has been shown to reduce methane in humans, and it's a fantastic little product. So I usually reach more for tools that are going to correct the dysbiosis and address that more so with methane if I'm tackling it head on. Um, so yeah, I don't know if ox bile was going to do it. So yeah. Let's see. Started to get constipated and didn't know why. Found a video on magnesium and B1, used my benfotiamine, and it elevated the problem. Also, it made the constipation worse. That's interesting. Yeah, that's fascinating. I don't know if I have a commentary on why it would make it worse, but uh, interesting. I haven't seen that before. I don't know. That's interesting, Nancy. Um, okay, back to incomplete slash constipation and bloating after trying probiotics for 3 months. How to write it back around just as a note. Gelatin and collagen are so bloating and painful. Oh my God, why? Again, I don't know if I have any theory as to why collagen and gelatin would make you feel bloated. Um, see, I'm gonna rack my brain for a second though, because I didn't think that I had a theory for the GERD person, and then I totally did. So let me rack my brain for a quick second. And I'll take a swig of water while I do multitask. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I have a good theory as to that. For the probiotic thing, most research suggests that probiotics will be out of your system within the span of like 10 to 14 days after you take the last capsule. So, probably just a matter of time before it's out of you. The other piece of it is that obviously the probiotics themselves leaving your body. That's one part of it. But if the probiotics altered or manipulated the ecosystem while they were there, then any changes to the ecosystem could remain intact after the probiotics are gone. So I would say if you just discontinued the probiotics more recently and it's been like less than 2 weeks, it's probably just a matter of waiting for a couple of weeks and then you're going to poop out all the probiotics anyway. If it's been more than 2 weeks and you still feel like you're not quite the same as you were, then I would keep tinkering with the ecosystem. It depends if you wanna do a different flavor of probiotics or if you want to try prebiotics or antimicrobials or whatever. But it could be that whatever changes were made to the ecosystem remain even after the probiotics were pooped out. And it's hard to give you more advice other than that, but those are kind of the two things that you're looking at probably. Let's see. You're welcome, Nancy. Oh my gosh. Hold on. Scrolled too far. Do you have suggestions for high methane levels in the morning, fasted, and throughout the day, and constipation? Are you using a food marble for that one, Julian? I'm going to assume if you're doing fasting, it's food marble based. So first of all, just FYI, um, food marble is going to have all the same issues that breath testing does. Um, so I don't recommend food marble either. That being said, there was an interesting paper from Dr. Harlech's team in Australia, and they showed that methane in particular can be coming from the oral cavity and it can have nothing to do with your gut, particularly if it's that fasting methane level and you have not had a glucose or a sugar substrate and you're not doing a breath test. Initial, like, fasted high methane levels is probably coming from your mouth. So I would look at things like any sort of dental work, if you have any funky root canals or funky old teeth that need to be fixed up. Um, are you breathing through your mouth at night and snoring? Because sleeping like that will definitely cause dysbiosis of the oral cavity. Um, yeah, my guess, until proven otherwise, is that this is more of a dental issue than a gut issue. Good question. Let's see. Had SIBO supposedly cleared, but still have type 5 stools most of the time, gas and whole body muscle tension. Ideas? Yeah, I don't know if you had SIBO or not. That again, that was the number one SIBO mistake to give away all of the prizes in the new series, which you should totally still watch. Um, I find that a lot of people are chasing the wrong goose and then they're questioning why they don't feel better yet, but you were chasing the wrong thing. So I would probably, again, go back to my framework that I've shared of those unsexy basic things that human beings need to be healthy. And think also in a sense of dysbiosis rather than SIBO. Like, what does the microbiome need to be healthy and resilient and strong? And that is variety in the foods that you eat, particularly plant foods, and the correct quantity of fiber. And you could also make the argument for vitamins and minerals and energy just overall. But I would think in that framework, and I bet that's going to do you a lot better versus the SIBO model. And I know, like, you put had in quotes, so it sounds like you don't even believe in your own SIBO diagnosis and the fact that it was supposedly cured or cleared. So yeah, I would pivot pretty hard into the idea of building a SIBO proof body and see if that gets you where you want to be. Let's see. I've tried everything to heal my SIBO with no results. Digestive enzymes, HCl, lowering stress, increasing diversity of plant fiber, elemental diet, rifaximin, and antimicrobials. What's left to try? Hard to say because I don't know you. There's a lot of stuff that I work with people on beyond what you rattled off. I mean, you hit some of the high points, certainly. The HCl, bile enzymes, etc. That's a great topic that can help people. We just had somebody in the Q&A yesterday for FODMAP Freedom that she's found that 2 capsules of betaine HCl has dramatically helped her constipation. So that's really cool. And we have a couple of people who we were kind of thinking along the lines of bile and enzyme support for them, but both of them decided to try bitters instead of ox bile, and both of them said the bitters have been really helpful for their bloating. Um, so I think the idea of supporting your digestive process is a good one, but same thing. I'm going to tell you the same thing that I told the other person who supposedly had SIBO and cleared it, but they still don't feel good. Um, I would say pivot into the idea of building a SIBO-proof body and thinking through what does a human being need to be healthy. And I'll tell you, I'll give away all my tricks. Human beings need good nutrition, and you can assess. I mean, the plant diversity thing, that's great that you were already thinking of that, but I'm telling you guys, like, hardly anybody's using this, and it kills me. You can get some pretty great nutrition data for free or really cheap on your smartphone if you just log a few days on Chronometer. You might find that you are not eating enough foods with niacin, and you could start targeting things nutritionally directly, and that might be it for you. Um, Not to say niacin is special. I was just giving an example of a nutrient. Um, so like an unsexy basic like nutrition 101 view of nutrition. Are you eating enough calories, period? Are you getting a reasonable amount of each of the macronutrients, protein, fat, and carbs? Are you getting enough quantity of fiber, which for women would be 25 grams per day? Are you getting a diverse array of fibers, which it sounds like you've already explored that at least a bit, which is great. Then you could get into the details of, are you hitting each of the vitamins and minerals, and are you getting a nutritionally replete diet? That's where I would start you. But just to flesh out this thought, human beings need good nutrition. Again, this nutrition 101 vision of nutrition, not SIBO specific. Um, we need sleep. We need, you could kind of ball up mental health, stress management, vagal tone, connections, all of that kind of mishmashes into one thing. I'm just going to call it mental health for the sake of simplicity. We need movement. We need sunlight. We need, in the mental health kind of bubble, we need to feel safe. If you don't feel safe and connected with the world around you in like a positive, good way, you're not going to get into rest and digest mode. Just it is what it is. Um, and then you could also make an argument for an absence of overt infections and pathogens, and you could make an argument for the absence of overtly toxic stuff. So, like heavy metals, mold, chemicals, that sort of stuff. But yeah, that's where I would start you off, certainly. But I would start with the nutrition. That's the first thing I teach my FODMAP Freedom students is let's get tracking on Chronometer a little bit. Let's see if there's any holes in your diet, and then let's try to fill those holes with food, not supplements, to the best of our ability. Yeah. Let's see. What are my thoughts on the probiotic Mutiflor Escherichia coli Nissel 1917? It's neat. It's neat. It's kind of like a fun party trick that you could tell people, oh, that's the probiotic that cured Hitler of his IBS. And it was the first probiotic ever made. So it's fun from that perspective. I honestly, I don't use it a ton because you can't buy it easily in the United States. But if, for folks who are in Europe or Canada, I sometimes have people buy it from a Canadian website and they'll ship it to the US. So it is possible to get it. It's just, it's a little bit more on the expensive side. I think it's like maybe $60 a bottle. And then you have to factor in the shipping from Canada and the pain that that is. So I just don't use it a ton for that reason. But it is very well researched. It can help everything from ulcerative colitis to IBS to constipation to probably a lot of stuff that I'm forgetting. So it's a fantastic probiotic. I'm actually very curious if it will be shown to help with SIBO one of these days. Because one of the ideas with that is that the good E. coli basically like dukes it out with the bad E. coli. And there's at least one study I'm aware of where they showed that the good Mutiflor E. coli can inhibit some of the bad strains of E. coli. And the reimagined studies like Pimentel's group and their efforts to do aspirates and then understand what's happening in the microbiome of the small bowel in people with SIBO. All of that work in recent years is consistently pointing to the idea that what we call SIBO is a flavor of dysbiosis where there's more E. coli or more Klebsiella or both. So I kind of wonder if Mutaflor would help with SIBO. I don't think they've researched that yet, but the idea of the good E. coli fighting the bad E. coli and helping with that flavor of dysbiosis, I think could line up well with Pimentel's current model of SIBO. So yeah, but it's a good product. It's not super readily available in the US, so I just don't use it a ton. Da, da. I'm on rifaximin, 10th day today, having extreme anxiety, which is my main problem with SIBO. Is this normal? Any recommendation? Oh, that stinks. So I have to do the disclaimer thing. So I'm not a prescriber. I'm a doctor. of chiropractic. So I know all of the natural hippy dippy stuff, and it's out of my scope of practice to give any advice with prescription medications or over the counter medications. Um, and like I've never prescribed rifaximin because again, I can't. So I really don't know what's normal and abnormal. I wish I could help you more. That stinks though. I'm really sorry. Yeah. I wish I could help. I'm sorry. Oh, that's unsatisfying. I want to be able to answer all of your questions. Um, Yazzie said, "Oh my god, thank you so much." You're welcome. I don't remember what you're thanking me for. I remember seeing you in a comment and answering whatever you asked, but I don't remember what it was. So, but you're welcome regardless. Let's see. What would you recommend for having a job that forces a person to sit for a prolonged period of time? Oh, yeah. I mean, the irony that I'm sitting right now, right? Um, I mean, try to exercise when you can. I don't know if there's much more beyond that. If your job would allow you to have a standing desk or a walking pad, those I have both of those things. I was standing earlier and then I lowered my desk a little while ago, and I have a walking pad. Best $300 I've spent on Amazon, maybe in my entire life. It's fantastic. I am right now. I'll show you. I'm using this really dorky ergonomic seat. Um, this is what I'm sitting on right now, where I was. And so you put your butt here and then your knees here. And then you're kind of like, you can rock on it a little bit. Um, I got it on Amazon. I don't remember how I found it, just ergonomic chair, maybe. But this is good. I actually use this because my other chair that I use more frequently creaks quite a bit. And I don't want the creaking to come across in recordings like this and my podcast. So I got this one originally for podcasting, but it's nice because like you have to engage your core and sit upright more. So I would say if you could use any of those little hacks and get a little bit more movement or good posture in your day, that would be great. I think the bigger thing is just making sure that you're moving your body outside of your work hours. Um, if you can, go to the gym or work out or do yoga or something like that, that's great. Another thought too is trying to go for walks on your lunch break. I remember actually my mom, she lost a lot of weight years ago. And one of the things that helped her tremendously was that she would go for walks every day on her lunch break. And it was so cute. She would actually peer pressure her friends into going. She would go to people's cubicles and she'd be like, "Come on, let's go." And they would bellyache and say, "No, I have work I need to do." And she would basically forcibly remove them from their cubicle. Or she would bribe them. One of her friends, she would bribe with a C's candy, so she had a stockpile of her friend Martha's favorite C's candy treat, and she would get one out of her desk drawer and go basically bribe Martha into going on these walks with her. And all of her little gang of work friends, they all had pedometers on their waistband and they would go tromping around downtown Boston, or they would go to like they worked near a mall, so they could go down a level and walk around the mall, or they could just walk in the city if it was nice weather. And I remember if she had a doctor's appointment or something, she would walk from her office to the doctor's appointment instead of drive. So that sort of thing goes a really long way too. Actually, I'm working on getting more active myself, and part of that is trimming off a couple of pounds, not anything crazy, but a couple pounds. And I swear, I think part of it was when we bought our second car, because when it was we had a car and I had a like a moped, like a scooter, and that was fun for a while, but I got tired of it after some point. But I would mix it up and I would walk to my office occasionally. And I swear, I think I gained 5 or 10 pounds when we bought a second car, and I just started being lazy and driving everywhere. So I miss being able to walk a mile to my office. That was good for me. Anyway, movement in other parts of your life. That's the answer. Sorry. Focus, Nikki, focus. Um, if tests are inconclusive, how do you determine treatment? Well, again, so I don't treat SIBO per se anymore. I find that to be very ineffective. I'm assuming that you're talking about SIBO because we had talked about it before, Melody. I don't treat SIBO very much at all. I'm very much in the space of building the SIBO proof body as the mainstay of what you're doing. So like, you can build a SIBO-proof body regardless of what the tests show you. So it doesn't really change what I would do. When we get to the end of FODMAP freedom, we do have a discussion about the critters and the patterns of the antimicrobials and how to target those. But that's a very, very small piece of what we do. And my goal is that 90% of students will get to that point in the program and realize that they don't need antimicrobials at all. So, um, yeah, I don't know if that helps, but yeah, I don't find the need to target it directly. I guess that's the short answer. Mm, Back to leaky gut. Can taking 10 grams of glutamine a day alone be enough to heal leaky gut? No. And how long would you take it for? I don't know, a couple weeks probably. I would say doing that alone is not going to touch your leaky gut. You still have to get to the root of why you have leaky gut in the first place. And there's a multitude of reasons why that would happen. But if you just take the glutamine and you change nothing about your nutrition and change nothing about your life, you're still going to have leaky gut at the end of the day. Like, don't be fooled. Um, Good to practice having binders, glycine glutamine along with anti-candida stuff? Maybe. We talked about binders a little bit. We see, this is what happens when I fall far behind, sorry. Um, yeah, so this is the person who said they were getting die-off from the caprylic acid. I would still go with what I said, and I would do a lower dose of caprylic acid plus something like SF722 undecilinic acid, and that way you get more anti-candida, uh, bang for your buck, so to speak, but without it being quite as die-offy. So I would still lean towards that. You could certainly do a little bit of charcoal. It's cheap. It's not gonna hurt you. Might make your poop a little bit darker, so just be forewarned. You're not dying, it's just the charcoal. Let's see. Hyperglycemia and SIBO. On rifaximin and metronidazole, clean diet, almost carnivore. Okay, your definition of clean diet and my definition of clean diet are wildly different. If you're almost carnivore, I would personally not call that a clean diet, but that's not what you're asking about. Blood sugar rises, stays up all day, and drops normal at night. Not diabetic, so why? Weight loss impossible. Again, I personally do not recommend carnivore in any way, shape, or form. Um, but that's like a whole can of worms. Probably gonna get shit in the comments for that. But, yeah, I don't know if the answer to blood sugar is continued degrees of restriction. Um, there's a lot of reasons for blood sugar wonkiness beyond just carb intake. Shitty sleep is a really big one, actually. If you have sleep apnea, or if you snore, or if you're a mouth breather at night, that alone can raise your glucose quite a bit. The other thing to keep in mind is that, see, we all think we're so smart. All of us with our smarty pants frontal lobes are trying to outfox the body, like, I have a blood sugar problem, so I'm just going to cut out all things that could possibly be sugar. Um, but your body is going to fight really hard to maintain the blood sugar level that it feels is appropriate. So, for example, two examples. Number one is that protein can be converted to sugar in the body. So, and that's why a true ketogenic diet is actually quite low in protein. Um, if you're eating too much protein, again, and you said you're nearly carnivore, that alone could be part of the problem. And that could be what's going on, is that you're just converting the excess protein that you're taking in into glucose. The other thing is that you have stored forms of energy all over the body in the form of fat and glycogen. Even if you're on a zero carb diet, you're going to have some glycogen in your muscles and your liver. And you have hormones and metabolic mechanisms in place that you can draw from that bank, that savings account of glycogen, and you can create blood sugar when you feel the need to do so. So I there is some degree of truth of, if you have high blood sugar or if you're diabetic or pre-diabetic, you need to cut out the sugar and the cupcakes. And like, N in the beginning of that conversation, the rationale of cutting out sugar and cutting out refined white carbs is perfectly logical and scientific and accurate, but the continued degree of restriction that it sounds like you're on, I don't think is the answer, and you might actually be making things notably worse. The other thing too is that the microbiome, what I said earlier, was the microbiome needs an adequate amount of fiber, so number of grams per day. For women, it's 25 grams per day. For men, it's, I think, 38 grams per day, which is quite a lot of fiber. That's what your microbiome needs to be healthy. Then you also need a diversity in that fiber. So if you eat 25 grams of fiber, but it's only coming from cucumbers, you're still shit out of luck, pun intended. But if you get 25 grams of fiber and you're eating carrots and zucchini and cucumbers and watermelon and rutabaga and PHGG and whatever, that's the diversity in that fiber is what's going to heal your microbiome. So again, if you're almost carnivore, you have almost certainly tanked your fiber intake quantity, but you've also tanked your diversity. And both of those things are not going to be good for your microbiome. And the thing is, there is a very strong relationship in the research evidence between insulin resistance, which is kind of like what you're describing right now. There's a very strong link for insulin resistance being tied to leaky gut syndrome and lower diversity in the microbiome. So, doing a near carnivore diet and reducing, presumably decreasing fiber quantity, fiber diversity, and probably increasing not only protein but saturated fat intake, you are eating a diet that is conducive to leaky gut and dysbiosis, and both of those things are going to make you more prone to insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome. It's the metaphor I shared earlier. You're digging yourself a deeper hole, and then you're complaining that you can't see out of the top of the hole. And I don't say that to be a meanie pie. I feel where you're at, and it probably, like, each step along the way, each scoop of dirt that you shoveled out probably made some logical sense along the way, but you're in pretty deep now, and you need to find a ladder out of this hole. And it might be tricky now, but I personally hypothesize it's going to include more fiber, more plant diversity, and probably less protein and less saturated fat, like a more balanced diet, even though carbs are evil. I'm sorry. You didn't say that. I'm not accusing you. I'm saying, like, broadly in the internet right now, everybody acts like carbs are evil. They're not. That's tough though. Oh no. Hold on. I scrolled. Let's see. How about SIBO for low ferritin and hair loss? Not where I would go immediately. Again, guys, free app, Chronometer, Chronometer. Download the free app. Just do a couple days with food log and look to see, are you consuming enough iron? Yes or no? Start with that. I almost guarantee you that you are not. I've seen enough of these that I can almost guarantee that. Start by asking if you're taking in enough iron before you jump into, like, the SIBO malabsorption thing. Um, and then keep in mind also, if you are eating the correct quantity of iron, but it's coming from primarily or exclusively plant-based sources, so think like spinach and chickpeas, you need to overshoot the RDA by a lot. So this is a known thing, right? Is that iron is more bioavailable if it is heme-based iron, and that would be found in meat, fish, and eggs. Plant-based iron is not as bioavailable and it's not as absorbable and digestible for our bodies. So if you are a plant-based eater and you're getting most of your iron or all of your iron from plant-based sources, you need to take the number that Chronometer gives you for the recommended daily value, and you need to inflate it an additional 40%. So let's see. Let's just look at mine. I don't know if this will show up on camera. Okay, so there's the main Chronometer. Here's my food diary here for today and all my input from my Whoop. Up here, you've got calories, protein, fat, etc. If you swipe, wrong way. If you swipe, you could see individual nutrients so far for the day. And you can see iron is the second one on the left-hand part of the page. If you click on iron, you could see where you got that iron from. And again, you could see, oh, are all of my iron sources from plant foods? Um, Chronometer tells me as a woman that I need to hit the RDA, which is 18 milligrams per day, which is quite a lot. It's more than men have to take in. But let's do, you're going to laugh. I'm pulling up the calculator on my computer. All right, 18 times 1.4, because again, 40% extra. So if you're vegan or vegetarian, or if you're If your iron sources are coming primarily from plant foods, you need a whopping 25.2 milligrams of iron per day. That is a lot of freaking iron. You're gonna have to do spinach smoothies all day long to get that. But yeah, I would my point, I would start with the nutritional question rather than jumping to SIBO. Uh, Starting an elemental diet to help with methane SIBO. Any suggestions or thoughts? Yeah, don't do it. I mean, I've talked about this before. I do not recommend the elemental diet personally, partially because I think it is very difficult to do and hard on the body, hard on the microbiome, hard on your psyche. It freaking sucks to do it. The other thing is, I don't feel the need to do it. Like again, if you guys just listen to me, for fuck's sake, if you just listen to me, build a SIBO-proof body and work on dysbiosis. You do those things, you don't need the elemental diet. But I know that's probably easier said than done, and some of you are going to come after me as a mob. Let's see. Is it not important to tease out bacterial versus fungal and yeast in dysbiosis? Telltale lower abdominal distension of the pregnant looking variety that presented one day out of nowhere, now in year 5. So, again, the thing is, whether you suspect that you have bacterial dysbiosis or fungal dysbiosis, the treatment remains largely the same. Um, so, again, quantity of fiber, diversity of fiber, and diversity in the diet, the unsexy basics, right? Nutrition, vitamins and minerals, that kind of crap, sleep, stress, movement, sunlight, like all of that still stands, regardless if you think you have a bacterial or a candida or yeast based problem. Um, at the very end of FODMAP Freedom, I give students a quiz to give them more of an understanding if candida or yeast is a part of it for them. And depending on where they score on that assessment, then I might make the recommendation for them to layer in a little bit of caprylic acid or a little bit of undecylinic acid or something like that. But again, 95% of the treatment remains the same. So I don't think it's necessary. That's just the way I practice it. Um, yeah. I mean, valid question though, Randy. Oh yeah, that somebody got back to me earlier. Julian said, yes, food marble. This occurred during rifaximin and was independent of oral hygiene. Other than that, which bitter supplement would you recommend? I don't know. I know the one person who talked about bitters helping her on the Q&A yesterday said that she tried Urban Moonshine brand. And I know it seemed like they had some good formulas and they maybe flavored it nicer. There was like fennel or something, orange or something fun in it. So yeah, I think she was doing her Urban Moonshine. I forget the other gal who was singing the praises of bitters. I forget which one she did. Um, let's see. Hi, could several rounds of antimicrobials cause fat or other malabsorption? I mean to reduce the good bacteria that much that is unable to break down food properly. Oh, thanks. Love your work. You're welcome. Yeah, I think I would give it a solid maybe. I don't know for sure, but what I will say is that a lot of people use the herbal antimicrobials kind of willy-nilly because we get fed this idea that if it's natural, it's totally safe and free of consequences. If it's natural, we could use as much as we want. And that's not true. Um, if you do heroic Alison Seebecker style dosing of oregano, you're gonna kill some good stuff along the way. I'd bet you a buck that you would. Um, versus, if you take like one capsule of berberine 2 or 3 times a day, maybe less of an issue. So I do think that there's an issue with overuse of herbal antimicrobials, and natural does not mean free of consequences. So if you've maybe overused herbal antimicrobials before, I could see that causing dysbiosis or yeah, or maybe some sort of malabsorption kind of issue. Again, always, always, always verify that you're eating the thing that you think that you are malabsorbing. So if it's calories or vitamin B12 or iron, just do a quick chronometer assessment for a few days and just verify that you're actually eating that. But if it's fat malabsorption, what I'm assuming is that you eat fat and then you get symptoms, or you eat fat and then you find that your stools are greasy or floaty or pale and you're getting the bowel movements characteristic of fat malabsorption. So that you could probably deduce without chronometer. I think so. Let's see. Somebody said, uh, hold on, scrolling. I had fasting insulin of 5 in July 2023. 1 comma 5. I'm gonna say that's 1.5. 1.5 on in December of 24. Is it normal to raise oh, maybe that's supposed to be 105? I think there's a typo, and that's making it confusing for me to interpret this. Had fasting insulin of 5, some mystery number on December 2024. Is it normal to raise this much? I have chronic inflammation, ESR of 39. Oof. I do not have high glucose. Yeah, it's hard. That one's a little bit jumbled, so it's hard for me to figure out what the question is and what the numbers are. Um, I would say it's probably not normal though. If I'm interpreting it correctly and your fasting insulin went from 5 up to 105 and it was only sorry, I'm like fiddling with my bra over here. Um, I if I'm interpreting this question correctly, that seems super not normal. And that again, if the jump was 5 to 105, which is what I'm reading here, um, that would actually be in the territory of like, you might want to see an endocrinologist, actually, because that would make me suspicious that the pancreas is up to something funny. And yeah, that's really sus, as the kids would say. So I would probably work with an endocrinologist. Lord, I don't know what brand of chair it is. I forget. I'm pretty sure I just typed in like ergonomic. You could also try ergonomic kneeling chair and type that into Amazon. I think that might be how I found it. Um, yeah, I like it though. It's good. And sometimes I have my knees on the pads and sometimes I just sit upright and I have my feet on either side and I'm not using the kneeling pad. But I like it. And it's good for my filming purposes. Thoughts on seed? It seems good. Um, I don't have a ton of experience with that one, but I've had several people report back to me that they thought it was really helpful for them. So I'm gonna say tentatively good. I just don't have a ton of personal experience with it. Um, have I used the Lactobacillus reuteri yogurt, the William Davis recommend yogurt? Had a lot of success with it for many clients. Yeah, that's good to know, Fowler. I've had people tell me about their experience with it, but I haven't had as many instances where I'm the one telling people to do it. Um, it just came up very, very recently. Funny enough, I was talking with another YouTuber about doing a live stream on her channel, and we were just talking about this, and it helped her a lot too. So I probably just need to recommend it more than I do currently. I don't know why it's not top of mind for me to do that, but yeah, I've heard some good feedback overall for the SIBO yogurt. Yeah. Yeah, but thank you for your input. Let's see. Can targeted probiotics based on GI mapping clear SIBO by balancing the microbiome? Well, first of all, the GI map is a garbage test, and I don't recommend it whatsoever. That's number one. Number two, I'm gonna go no for a couple of reasons. Um, whatever stool test you use, whether it's the garbage GI map or the gut zoomer or something else, you are looking at something that came out of the anus. And that is gonna be mostly reflective of the distal colon. So not even the whole colon. I'm talking like the last part of the colon. That's gonna be the closest you get to what you're seeing in stool. Because there's different parts of that ecosystem, right? Like, you could look at the ecosystem of I'm trying to think of a good example. Like, you could talk about the ecosystem of North America, but then we could zoom in on, the southeastern United States versus like northern Canada versus the Pacific Northwest is a literal rainforest. I learned that when I was an adult. That's wild. Like we have a rainforest here in my country. like there's rainforests, there's deserts, like you could talk about a broader ecosystem and then you could zoom in and even, you get to something like the regional ecosystem in the Southeast United States and then you get into here in my state that I live in, the ecosystem at the beach versus the middle of the state of North Carolina where I live versus the mountains in North Carolina, that is wildly different. And then you think about the ecosystem differences with like the critters that live close to the creeks and the rivers versus the critters that live like up high in the trees. My point is, we tend, and I'm guilty of this too, we tend to talk about the microbiome in really simplistic terms, and it's not accurate to really do that. And even talking about the ecosystem or the microbiome of the colon is not totally accurate because the ecosystem in the first part versus the middle versus the latter part of the colon do look different. And then when you talk about the difference between the colon versus the small intestine, that's like night and day different. So the biggest thing of what you said is that you can't diagnose or monitor or try to treat SIBO based on stool testing. And the GI Map company and the Gut Zoomer company are laughing all the way to the bank, telling you that you could do that. And I will tell you, I've read the science. One of Pimentel's studies, it's up like one of those reimagined studies, definitively debunked this. I don't know if that was their intention, but that was my takeaway from that particular paper. So that's number one. Number two, I will just share. Like, let's remove the conversation of small bowel versus colon and stool testing. The other thing I will share is that I wanted to practice that way for a while, and it made logical sense for my nerd brain. So I would do stool testing. I would see with my smarty pants brain, ooh, this person needs more bifido. So I'm going to give them a bifido based probiotic. Or like, ooh, this person doesn't have enough lacto. I'm going to give them lactobacillus probiotics. And I'll just tell you, I did not see good success with that from a symptomatic standpoint. So I abandoned it. I maybe did that for about 2 years. I gave it a really good go. And it wasn't that simple. It wasn't that linear. And now that I've had people doing the speed dating and like trying out a bunch of different probiotics and listening more to their symptoms and their intuition rather than a test, I will tell you, I've had loads of people who are like, oh, isn't that weird? The probiotic I fell in love with is a lactobacillus, but like my lactobacillus looked actually totally fine and good when I did stool testing. I don't know, man. I don't know. I can't wrap my head around why. Like, if somebody has good, robust levels of bifido on their stool test, and then they fall in love with a bifido probiotic and it helps with their bloating and their poops, like, I haven't wrapped my head around why that person would theoretically need more bifido. But I'm also, as much as I like the data, I'm not gonna use the data to argue with that person's actual experience. So I'm comfortable saying, "I don't understand it, but I'm acknowledging it, and I think it's neat." So that was long long-winded, but hopefully that helped. Whew. Guys, I've been talking for a while, huh? This is a yeah, long Q&A. Just heads up, I'm probably gonna call it quits around 3-ish, and that's not necessarily telling you to frantically submit all your questions now. I'm giving you a heads up. So, I might not get to all of the questions. I was trying really hard to answer everybody's questions, but I'm gonna start skimming a little bit and maybe picking out the ones that I think are the best questions or the questions that we haven't talked about yet or the questions that would be most broadly applicable to the group and help the most people. So, sorry if I don't get to your question. I was trying really hard to do that. Let's see. Um, yeah, Julian asked about my thoughts on LDN. I've had some people who seem to like it as a prokinetic. Yeah. Um, yeah, I don't know if it matters if you have antivinculin, but I've had some people who thought LDN was a helpful motility agent for them. Um, let's see. This person said struggling with SIBO and gallstones for 8 years. I'm sorry. I mean, there wasn't really a question for me to answer, but I do want to acknowledge it and say I'm really sorry. That sucks. Let's see. Somebody asked about abdominal muscle weakness having anything to do with upper GI discomfort. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen that. Kind of getting back to my chiropractic roots, I could see some relationship between, like, the musculoskeletal structures of the body and the organs contained within, but I don't know if I could really hypothesize much. If stool testing shows parasites, do you recommend treating them? Yeah, yeah. Even if it's a functional test, I'd probably try to treat it. Um, I would say, guys, here's something. I'm a crunchy hippy dippy person. I have my little essential oils here on my desk, wafting 'em. I do all the things that I try to tell you to do. I really try to practice what I preach. And I try to do things naturally first and foremost whenever I can. However, if you think you have an actual, real, honest to goodness parasite, please just go get a prescription for it. The prescriptions are so effective. It's like, I forget the numbers, but it's something like a 3-day course of albendazole is like 90+% effective or something insane like that. So this is actually one of those areas where I'm not going to recommend you do the black walnut and all of the hippy dippy stuff. I would actually just assume that you do a prescription if you can get your hands on it. Let's see. Somebody asked, they're getting ready to do, Michael said, getting ready to do antimicrobials, but he also has tinnitus. Should he go rifaximin and metronidazole or go herbal? I have heard several people, or I've met several people who got tinnitus from metronidazole. Again, technically out of my scope of practice, it's a prescription, but if you have existing tinnitus, I feel like I would go the herbal route. But again, I want to reinforce building a SIBO-proof body is still the number one, and that should be 95% of your game plan. And there are natural methods to decrease methane. Namely, what I mentioned earlier is sun fiber, also known as PHGG, and BioGaia gastrus. I would lean into those things long before and much heavier than an antimicrobial regimen, whether you're talking about prescription or herbal. So remember that. Hold on, tried to scroll and I went too far. If somebody has a hormone imbalance, do you recommend addressing that first before considering your program? It sort of depends on the nature of the hormone imbalance and what you think you're going to do to tackle it. If you are ragingly hypothyroid and you are trying to treat it naturally and deny yourself the miracle that is a prescription thyroid hormone replacement, then yeah, I don't think I'm gonna be able to help you much in my program, and I have had people like that, by the way, who are like, "I need to do it naturally. I refuse levo," and their TSH is like 12. Um, so yeah, in that case, I'd probably work on that first. If it's more like period female hormonal stuff or like for men, low testosterone, again, it depends how severe it is and how much it's impacting your life. Um, I would say if your hormone imbalance is mild to moderate, then my program is probably going to help you with that. And it's going to be treating it a lot more holistically. And wouldn't that be nice? If you have like severe crippling PMS, like I have worked with women where it's the damnedest thing. They'll have mood swings out of this world. Like we'll have an appointment and we're like, yeah, we have a good appointment and we're clicking and we made good progress and everybody's happy. She's happy. I'm happy. We're all happy. We have a game plan. And then 2 weeks later, I get messages in the patient portal and they are completely off the rails, a totally different human being. If it's something more severe like that, or like if you're kind of on a ticking time clock working on fertility treatments, for example, or, for men, if your testosterone is below the LabCorp reference range and you just can't even function because your testosterone is so low, if it's that severe, I probably would work on it a little bit or consider pharmaceuticals to help for a little period of time before you do something like my program. But again, if it's like mild to moderate, then we would probably help you with it. Yeah. Um, Yeah, Alruterite yogurt, I briefly mentioned that, Andrew. Basically, I've gotten good feedback from it, like the SIBO yogurt. I'm not usually the one to recommend it. Funny enough, like I need to just remember to recommend it more. But yeah, overall, it seems like it's very helpful for a lot of people. Doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. How do I know if I need a probiotic, and how do I find the right one? I have people speed date, and I tell my FODMAP freedom students, this is the funny thing is, I think that my system works. It's not necessarily the most scientific. Um, in theory, if we were to try out a probiotic and we wanted to really judge what it's doing for you, then we would want you to take that same probiotic for probably a minimum of a month, maybe even 6 weeks before we pass a judgment on it. That being said, what if you have to try numerous probiotics? And most of us, myself included, are not that patient. So, and especially in this community, there's a lot of fear around probiotics, and there's a lot of belief that probiotics will make you feel worse. So, what I personally do is at some point, I just said, screw it. I remember the patient still to this day. Hi, Laura, if you're watching. Um, she's been doing good for years, so I don't think she's watching. But I remember I recommended a particular probiotic for her. She tried it, vehemently hated it, sent me a portal message and was like, "This is awful." And I felt so bad because it was not a cheap one. It was like 60 bucks or something, I think. And I was like, "Oh, I feel bad." And then when I was talking to her in the office for our next appointment and we were talking about this, I was like, "You know what? Screw it." So I marched my little butt out to the fridge that I had. I grabbed one of each bottle that I had, and I sat there at my desk with her, and I had little baggies because I was already doing the prokinetic speed dating at this point, if I remember correctly. I had little baggies, and I started getting, like, sticky notes and stuff, and I was just taking out, like, 2 capsules of each, putting in a baggie, sticky note. And I did that with, like, 6 or 8 different products, and I basically said, "I give up. I don't know which one you're gonna like. Try these, report back." And I've been doing that ever since. I think that it's really nice from the anxiety fear perspective. So for people who are really fearful or anxious of taking probiotics, it's a nice way to speed date them. And I do this with all my FODMAP Freedom students for that matter. I just shipped 2 of these kits this morning, actually. Um, but again, like it's oftentimes doing this where it's like 20 different products and there's 2 capsules of each, and it's just this rapid fire speed dating. I was just telling somebody, I was leaving her a message about the probiotics I shipped her today, and I said, "Remember this whole protocol and everything, it's in XYZ of FODMAP Freedom, but I'm gonna verbally remind you, the vast majority of these are gonna seem like they do diddly squat because it's super unfair that we're only giving them 2 days. But most of them seem like they do jack shit. Maybe 1 or 2 of them you're not gonna like for whatever reason, more bloating, worse poop, whatever. And then there's almost always 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 that show some degree of promise, and you take note of it and go, "Hey." And you make note of those products that seem promising in the speed dating, and then at the end of it, that's what you're gonna be ordering a bottle of. So, at least you prove to yourself that you can tolerate it and it's not gonna make you feel worse, but you also have this little glimmer of hope that, "Hey, if it made me feel 2% better in the span of 2 days, what happens when I take it for a month?" And you follow that curiosity. So again, it could take a longer period of time for probiotics to fully work. I acknowledge that. And again, like this would never fly in a research paper, but I find that it works well for the people I work with. Um, and it's a group of people who typically are very hesitant to try probiotics. So I find that it's a very like accessible, compassionate way to do this for the people I work with. So let me look back. Did I answer your question? Yeah, I mean, so that's how I do it. If you weren't going through my program and you weren't doing the speed dating, I think the next runner up is to use a tool like the Probiotic Advisor website. It's like 30 bucks for the year. It's totally worth it. But I would probably otherwise I would hop on Probiotic Advisor and I would search for some of the symptoms or diagnoses that you have. So you could type in constipation, diarrhea, bloating, IBS, IBSD, IBSC, um, that sort of stuff. And I would type that and then I would look and see what the research has proven to be effective for those symptoms or conditions. Yeah. Okay. Doing good on the hydration, people. Practice what I preach. Oh, okay. Thank God. The person. Luija commented, "I made a typo. Insulin went from 5 to 10." Oh, okay. Okay. I was really wondering when I thought it was 105 or whatever it was that I read, and that's why I was like, "Ooh, you need an endocrinologist." If it went from 5 to 10, that's not the most concerning. I guess my big question is, did you change your diet during that time? Because if you, for example, if you were eating a super low carb diet when you got the 5 number, but you reintroduced some carbs, even like complex healthy carbs, then I think 10 is not that egregious. My guess is that that was provoked by a dietary change, but I don't know. Oh, poop. Every time I try to scroll with the mouse, it wakes out on me. Hold on. Mhm. Michael asked, "What do I think about biofilm disruptors?" I have been itching to do a video on this channel about biofilms. Actually, maybe 1 or 2 videos, and I'm right on the cusp of being able to do it. Again, this SIBO mistake series was a labor of love. I did all of the video editing myself. That's why you get little glimpses of my sense of humor and TV shows and movies that I like. I think I managed, let's see. I got Friends, The Good Place, 30 Rock. I might have snuck in a Parks and Rec one. I forget now if I did Parks and Rec yet. Firefly. I put in some K-pop stuff. I had fun with it, but it was a lot of work doing the series. So I'm probably gonna take like 2 weeks before I post anything else on YouTube because I haven't filmed anything right now. I was just getting through the series. Um, Biofilms are really high on my list though. I really want to tackle it. The problem is that there's not actually that much research on GI biofilms in humans. Almost all of the biofilm research that we have is in some other animal or it's on an implant. So, like a catheter, for example. And so, when I started the first leg of the research for this project, like 2 years ago, I was I was on PubMed and I'm searching. I'm like, okay, biofilm, and I think I did parentheses title, and then it was like a bajillion hits. I'm like, okay, biofilm and gastrointestinal. Okay, a gajillion minus 3 hits. Okay. But then it was like all of the hits were like biofilm in bovine such and swine such and such. So I'm like, all right, biofilm and gastrointestinal, not bovine, not porcine, not broiler hen, not, and then I was getting weird stuff like camels. I'm like, not camel. And it was just this big, long, weird search string that I was trying to get to. And it was whittling down the results to almost nothing. But I'm determined. There's got to be something usable and interesting for us to go off of. But I think that a lot of the talk about biofilm disruptors is um, it's either total internet hogwash or it is from people's clinical experience and experimenting and not necessarily founded in real research, which doesn't mean it's bad intrinsically, by the way. Just because something hasn't been researched yet doesn't mean that it's total hogwash. But I'm approaching it from the angle of what do we have in the research and the scientific literature right now? And can I use the science that we have available to make sense out of the claims that you see on the internet? And that's kind of where I'm at. But I'm hoping to do a biofilm video in the next month or two. And I'm excited. Like the nerd in me is kind of excited about this research project. And it's been a long time coming. Uh, when to start using prokinetics? I usually start 'em pretty early in the process because 'cause they're well tolerated and they help. They help a lot of people. So I would say soon, today? I don't know. Let's see. Which fibers would you introduce first when somebody has that was 2 years on lion-only diet and wants to go back, which stopped working? I don't know what the lion-only diet is. Is that carnivore, basically? Like meat only? Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna assume carnivore or close to carnivore because I actually have never heard the lion-only diet. Um, I would probably start with low FODMAP fruits and vegetables first and gradually introduce those foods and then eventually graduate into the FODMAPs. That's how, and actually we have somebody right now who's in FODMAP freedom And he has an autoimmune condition, and some of his reactions have been pretty severe to foods in the past. So we're going really carefully and cautiously with him. And that was basically the recommendation I made to him, is that because he had done carnivore for a period of time and he's doing carnivore plus just a couple of things right now. So my recommendation to him was, let's start with the low FODMAP fruits and vegetables first. Start with a small quantity and then build gradually, and let's work on that maybe for months first, and then eventually you're gonna add in some high FODMAP stuff, but it's gonna be a long road for him at least. It's hard to retrain the microbiome to come off of something like that. For the earlier parasite question, you don't recommend a stool test and think it's inaccurate. So, how do I even find out if I have a parasite? I like stool testing just fine. It's just I don't recommend a lot of the functional stool tests. That's the thing. So, the GI map, I absolutely don't recommend anymore. And for those of you who don't know, like I'll just say, so I did videos on this YouTube channel 3 years ago, and I did split sample testing where I had two different people do this for me. I had them collect a stool sample, stir it to the best of their ability, and portion it equally into two GI map containers. And I had them submit those under two different names. And we compared the results, and the results were wildly different. Like, one test claimed that the person had a parasite, and the person's other test said that there was no parasite to be seen. The other person, one of his tests claimed that he had one of the pathogenic bad E. coli's from the first page of that report. His other stool test, same person, same day, same poop, said none detected whatsoever. And there were some other things with it too, but I made a video discussing my findings, and admittedly, I was prickly. I was pissed. Like, people spend bajillions of dollars, and this stool test has taken over my profession, and they've swooned every functional and naturopathic doctor on planet Earth, and to find out that it's all hogwash and that it's unusable data was very frustrating. And so anyway, so I was a little bit prickly, but they saw that video and they proceeded to attack me and say that my methods were unscientific, and they attacked my character, and then they threatened to sue me. So I had to remove that video from YouTube, which is still frustrating to this day 3 years later. So I based on my split testing, I personally don't think that that test is clinically useful. And based on my interactions with the people who work for that company and my experience with the company itself, I don't think they have a moral backbone. So that's why I don't recommend the GI map. Um, and we talked a little bit about the gut zoomer, which again I don't recommend, mostly because they give these weird nothing burger ranges, and I don't trust that. I wanna see, like, a percentage or a number, and then I can make the decision if I think it's high or low. Or you could at least give me the quantifiable number, and then you could show me on the graph if you think it's in, like, the green, yellow, or red zone, but they don't do that, and I find that really weird, um, and kind of unusable. If I do stool tests, so if somebody has a history that sounds like they could actually have a parasite, for real, or if they have a functional test like doctor's data or a GI map that says they have a parasite, my recommendation is to do a conventional medical laboratory stool test. So LabCorp or Quest here in the United States, probably, or maybe Kaiser if you're in California. I would ask for a follow-up confirmatory stool test from, like, your primary care or your GI doctor, and I would look for parasites that way and try to confirm or deny the results that you saw on the functional test. If you don't have a functional test telling you that you have a parasite and you just suspect it, like maybe you're really, really outdoorsy and you do a ton of camping and you're, like, outside a lot at a body of water, um, then I would just do the conventional testing and I would skip the functional. So, it's not that I'm anti-stool test, it's just I think that we have to wrap our heads around where the technology is at and what is actually doable and feasible with stool testing in this current day and age. And we have to acknowledge the limitations. For example, we cannot diagnose or monitor SIBO based on stool testing. And that's just like that's an anatomy thing, not anything against stool testing. It's just we can't deduce what's happening in the small bowel based on what comes out of our anus. That's just not going to happen. Um, but again, I'm not anti-stool testing. I will say I've used, there's a cheap 16S test that I've used for years called Ombre, and I still do a little bit. If you're overseas, the nearest equivalent would be Biomesite, all one word. So Biomesigt, Biomesite. Um, and those are fine, and they're like $100, so it's pretty cheap for what you get. And I still occasionally use that with people, but honestly, going back to this theme of building a SIBO-proof body and building a diverse, healthy, strong, resilient microbiome, you can do both of those things without ever seeing a stool test. So I find that for what I'm working with, which is largely bacterial and fungal-based dysbiosis, I find that I just don't need stool testing to do that, and I could save people a couple $100. Again, if you have suspicion of a parasite for real, then that actually might be a time and a place to do some conventional testing and just see if you can confirm or deny that. And then you can monitor the success of any sort of treatment also. So time and a place, but it's overused. Stool testing. Nancy wants to know where I'm located. I am in the triangle of North Carolina, so Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill. I'm smack dab in the middle of North Carolina. Um, Wolf Moon Media, what a great name, said, "Thanks for the great answers and for going live." Yeah, you're welcome. It was fun. Again, I'm probably gonna wrap up shortly. Let me just skim what I got here. Ooh, Gina asked about SIBO and histamine intolerance. I do think they could be interlinked. I see a lot of people in FODMAP Freedom who have both, like, they come in with the SIBO diagnosis and they also have histamine issues. And we talk about that quite a lot in FODMAP Freedom, so there definitely is some overlap there. There's at least one paper that particularly points a finger at Klebsiella. There's one particular species and strain of Klebsiella that was shown to be a big histamine producer. Now, I don't know if we could extrapolate to that entire species, and I don't know if we could extrapolate to that entire genus of Klebsiella, but there's one paper that was very interesting in that regard. So again, going back to Pimentel's group and their aspirate studies trying to understand SIBO, keep pointing back to the idea of E. coli and Klebsiella being what is the overgrowth. So it would then track if Klebsiella is one of the culprits behind SIBO, it would make sense that a fair amount of people struggle with the histamine issue. So yeah. Let's see. All right. This person asked about Xifaxan. I'm going to skip it again because, again, starting to wind down and also not a prescriber. Uh, da- da. I've mentioned abdominal adhesions being a potential root cause for SIBO. If that were a root cause, are you destined to always get SIBO? No. What I would say to that is, could that be a factor? Yes. I find in my experience, though, a lot of people go down that path of like, "Oh god, I'm screwed and I'm always gonna have SIBO," and there's universally always numerous things that you can work on that would benefit your SIBO situation, regardless of the adhesions. So I'll give you an example. So we had a student, I think she was in the January class last year. So she went through, and I remember a big theme for her was adhesions, adhesions, adhesions. And she had been told by a well-intentioned practitioner, or maybe several practitioners, that because she has endometriosis, she therefore has adhesions, and she therefore has SIBO for that reason. And she had had the laparoscopy flew out of my brain. She had the procedure. She had the procedure where they go in and they like break up some of that tissue and they suck it out, and they did the thing to try to clean up the endometriosis. And it did not help her even in the slightest bit. Um, and she was considering doing it again, but she didn't know. And she kept going back to this idea of adhesions. But what's wild is when we talked about her root cause story at the first meet and greet or the first Q&A, she, when I was working with her, she was 50 or 51. She had had endometriosis her whole menstruating life, but she had only developed SIBO supposedly about 4 years prior. So I'm like, "Okay, what are the odds that the same adhesions magically decided to give you SIBO after all these years?" Like, that doesn't make sense to me. Um, but she described the year preceding her SIBO onset, she described it as the trauma year. And it was one of those years where everything went wrong. Um, Her mom died, her husband was out of work for a while, her work was really crazy, and then the pandemic happened, and everybody was on lockdown, and everybody's mental health was in the shitter. Like, all of these things happened, and then she developed what she was later told was SIBO. And I was the one to point out to her, I was like, "I don't think it's the adhesions, man. Again, you had endometriosis your entire menstruating life, and that endometriosis never gave you no damn SIBO, but this makes a fuck ton of sense. Your vagus nerve is checked out to lunch because you had the most stressful year of your entire life, and your vagal tone went out the window, and of course you're not digesting your food. Of course you don't have motility to save your life. This is it. It's a vagal tone thing." But again, she was told by well-intentioned people numerous times that it was because of the endometriosis, it was the adhesions. So it took a lot of coaching to drill that out of her head. She was in that stuck mindset of like, "Woe is me, I'm gonna have SIBO forever because of the adhesions," and eventually, we got her out of that loop, and I still keep in touch with her on Instagram a little bit, and we go back and forth, mostly making fun of each other's countries because she lives in Australia and I live here. But we still go back and forth, and she's getting there bit by bit. She's working on things, and she's feeling better and better, but yeah, it wasn't no damn adhesions. So I think that adhesions can be part of the story for some people. I think probably it's used as a little bit of a cop out in the functional naturopathic integrative space. And and even if the adhesions are part of the problem, you can still work on the nutrition, the stress, the sleep, the movement, the whatever, even with the adhesion still there. So I guess that's the thing. Is like I think for the case, I think there's a hair on my shirt. In the case of something like endo, then maybe it would change your decision making in the sense that you might get a procedure to try to work on the endometriosis. But otherwise, I don't know if the adhesions are going to super inform your decision making, and you should still be focusing on building a SIBO-proof body so that you could be free of SIBO despite maybe adhesions. I don't know. That should probably be a video. I should probably do a video on this channel about that. Da, da. Let's see. I'm just gonna I'm just gonna skim and do 1 or 2 more because again, I said I was gonna wrap up at 3, and then it is now 10 after 3. So just gonna look a little bit. Okay, so Jen asked about the sign up date for FODMAP Freedom. So we just did the week 5 Q&A with this current group. So we're smack dab in the middle of it right now with this group. Let me pull up. Hold on. Hold on. What I would say if you're thinking about it is make sure that you're on the wait list because the wait list gets notification first. And that way, if there's a limited number of seats and we've had to cap enrollment before, so that way you can just be super sure that you're going to get your spot and have first dibs. And there's also a sign up bonus for the first week of enrollment. Um, and then keep your eyes on your email on Monday, April 28th. And that's when we're going to be starting with the next group. So yeah, that's what I do. But join the wait list, and that way you know you get those early emails. I don't have a ton of experience with rosacea. Somebody asked about that. There was a really neat study that I sent to somebody more recently in a FODMAP Freedom Q&A, and it was basically they used ox bile, quercetin and maybe one other thing. It might have been charcoal. It was basically the bile kind of treatment more or less that they were going for, and they had pretty great results with that. And so I sent that study, or I talked about it with one of my FODMAP Freedom students, and she incorporated ox bile or tubkai, I forget which one, into her kind of routine, and she did think it helped. That's a N equals 1 little mini experiment, but other than that, I don't have a ton of info on rosacea. Let's see. Yeah, you're welcome, guys. Let's see. Yeah, I think I'll maybe do this one. Somebody asked, oh, okay, 2. Um, Blastocystis hominis is interesting because, the probiotic advisor had some stuff on this. I think it might have been in one of his courses, but basically there are different strains of blastocystis, and not all of them require treatment. Actually, they think now that blastocystis is like the apex predator of the gut ecosystem, and they're thinking now that we should leave it alone. Yeah. How many functional medicine doctors have made a pretty penny off of scaring the bejesus out of people with blastocystis on a doctor's data stool test, right? Um, but yeah, the paper that I saw, or I think that the probiotic advisor talked about, they likened it to if you have an ecosystem like, say, Yosemite, and you take away the apex predator, which in this case would be the wolves. What happens? Well, everything else goes weird. Like, now you have an overpopulation problem with deer, and now there's not enough grass and not enough food to sustain the deer population. And then that's going to have trickle down effects that affect like the bunny rabbits and the squirrels and the fish and the mosquitoes and the whatever. And the whole ecosystem basically goes to shit without their apex predator in place. So when they reintroduced wolves to Yosemite, as an example, everything balanced out. It's, kumbaya, the circle of life, and everything is much, much better now. And it's because we have that balance. Like the predator is picking off the weak or the old deer and keeping that population where it needs to be. And there's just the right amount of food and grass to sustain all of the plant eaters. And balance is key. So they're actually kind of thinking that blastocystis is akin to the wolves and it's the apex predator and we should leave it alone. It's been a little bit of time since I looked at that research. I think I learned that from the probiotic advisor maybe like 2 or 3 or 4 years ago. So I'm not positive that that is still current, but I thought that was really interesting. And it's interesting too, because I've seen a lot of people who try to treat blastocystis with a functional provider and then they don't feel any better whatsoever. And that really, it when I learned the thing about the apex predator thing, it really lined up with the feedback that I've gotten from people in their attempts to treat blastocystis. So interesting. Um, let's see. And then I had one other. Where are we? Robbie asked, can you treat SIBO with probiotics and building the microbiome? Yes and no to a certain extent. Um, I don't know if probiotics alone would do it for everybody. I'd say maybe. We were just talking earlier about the SIBO yogurt, the Dr. Davis SIBO yogurt being really helpful for people. Um, so I think that's a good step in the right direction. Is that the totality of the SIBO story for everybody? Probably not, but I think it's worth considering, certainly. Let's see. There was one other I wanted to do. Where'd it go? I see. I got distracted with the blastocystis thing. Hold on. Rosacea program. Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay. So one more hurrah is how do you tell the difference between SIBO and fungal overgrowth? I've watched the video you made on this, but still am struggling to figure it out. All my symptoms go away on carnivore. Um, yeah. So here's something too, is we were talking earlier about the limitation of stool testing and the limitation of SIBO breath testing. I still think there's a time and a place for stool testing. Um, SIBO breath testing, not so much. Again, maybe methane, maybe, but I find it unnecessary still. Candida testing is worse. So there's all these, like stool tests or the oat test or whatever will claim to diagnose candida. I don't know, man. Um, it would be so much easier if we could just do a candida test and figure out if you have candida. Lucy Mailing has a good blog on her website if you check that out. So it's Lucy and then mail, like the post office mail, ing, mailing. Look up her name, go to her blog. It's pretty recent, or it's one of her more recent blog posts. But basically, they showed that the the markers that the organic acids test and like the Nutrieval, the markers that these companies claim are candida markers in urine probably are not. There's one variant that maybe could be useful, one marker or one variant of one marker that could be useful, but all the rest of it is probably hogwash. So that I don't think the oat is a viable way to diagnose candida. Stool testing, similarly, probably iffy at best. What I was doing when I used to use the GI map is that if somebody had candida or yeast show up, period, at all on that stool test, we would take action on it. And the rationale is that I'd seen so many of those over the years that I could tell you the vast majority of GI map tests do not show any yeast. So if it's detected at all, I thought that was reason enough to go after it. Now again, go after it. I mean, I would do natural antifungals like caprylic acid, and we would maybe just cut out simple sugar from the diet, and we wouldn't go super hardcore candida diet on them anyway. So I felt like I could do that pretty safely and effectively. So that's kind of what I would do clinically when I was trying to tackle that. Again, candida not there, the oat not so much. There's also blood tests, and you could look at the antibody response to Candida albicans. I have not fully wrapped my head around the utility of using that for diagnosing GI candida. That is so. In addition to biofilms, another deep dive topic that I've been dying to do on this channel is to do a deep dive on can we diagnose candida in the gastrointestinal system, and if so, what is the best, most accurate way to diagnose it? And I haven't bitten that one off yet because I honest to God think it's gonna be like a month-long deep dive on PubMed to do it. I'm at the stage in my YouTube career where all of the low-hanging fruit has been covered, I think. Now I have my eyes set on some really juicy topics, and they're gonna be super fun for me to do, but it's also gonna take a lot of time and work to just do the deep dive and comb through the literature and try to make sense of it. Um, but anyway, that's one that I wanna cover eventually too is can we diagnose candida? Period. And 2, what is the best method available? Right now, my preliminary searching, I'm kind of the opinion that we don't have a good test currently. So that means you're essentially left with symptoms and trial and error. If your story and your symptoms sound like candida, then I would entertain the thought of trying to treat it. If it quacks like a duck, walks like a duck, assume that it's a duck sort of vibe. Um, Also, you could do something called treating empirically, which is basically treating it without test results. But what I would say is that each time you try to treat something, you are gathering data. If you take a candida antimicrobial supplement and you feel better, you just strengthened the hypothesis that you have candida and you should keep going. But if you try an anti-candida supplement and you feel no different, and it's not helping you at all, I think that weakens the hypothesis of candida for you. And then similarly, if you try a different product, like say somebody thinks they have candida and they try caprylic acid and the caprylic acid doesn't do anything for them. So they pivot and now they try monolaurin or um, the SF722 undecylinic acid stuff. And let's say that that round of candida stuff also doesn't do anything for them. The more times you try to treat candida unsuccessfully, the weaker that hypothesis becomes. So that's kind of what you're left with, in my opinion, is A, does your history and your symptoms match up? Did all of this start after you took antibiotics? That's the humdinger for candida. Um, and then if you try to treat candida, do you feel better? Yes or no? And then you could either build or take away from that hypothesis the more you try to do that. I think also if you have tried treating something like candida or SIBO or parasites more than 2 or 3 times, I think you need to give it a rest, and I would say don't be a stubborn dummy and just, like, move on to the next theory at that point. Because I've seen people who are dead set that they have candida, and they'll keep taking antimicrobials until the cows come home, and they've tried every antimicrobial on the market, and it feels silly and stupid, but sometimes I'm the person who's like, "But maybe you don't have candida." And then we have to start from square one. So, those are my thoughts. Hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully. I wish that we had a good test for candida. That actually really irks me deeply. There was a book. Do I have hold on, as I scan my messy office. Is it over there? Yeah. Okay, hold on. Let me grab a book. This will be the grand finale, people. Okay. Admittedly, I'm one of those people who tends to buy books with the best of intentions, and then I let them sit on my shelf. It just is what it is. One of my FODMAP Freedom students recommended this book to me and said that it was very helpful for him, and he said that the quiz in here was helpful for him. He did the quiz in FODMAP Freedom, and that also pointed him towards candida, but he thought that this quiz was good too. It's called The Candida Cure. Again, I have not read this. I purchased it, put it on my bookshelf. I have not touched it. But I have at least one person who said that this book was helpful for him and it was useful. I don't know how super strict her diet recommendations are going to be. I don't know any of the supplements or any of the strategies that she's recommending. So it could be a bust. But I have one person. Thank you, George, said that this was a good book, so I purchased it, and if you're curious about candida, maybe that would be another kind of step in the right direction. So, that's all I got. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. Hold on one second. Let me just grab something here. All right. Wanted to do that. Thank you all for tuning in. This was really nice. I mean, I hope that I answered some of your questions and maybe gave you a little bit of hope that there's light at the end of this tunnel, this very poopy tunnel. Again, if you haven't checked out the new SIBO mistake series, go do that. I'm really proud of how it turned out, both from like the educational, scientific content perspective and also the editing perspective, since I put a lot of fun stuff and little bits of my humor in there. Um, I think there was something. Oh, I was going to say too, if any of the SIBO mistake videos in particular really stood out to you or really like helped you in some way, or you think that it was great to learn, if you would be so kind as to share one of those videos in the IBS or the SIBO forums or share them on your personal feed, that would actually be really helpful. The more we kind of get the word out there and the more people get their eyes on my videos, that helps strengthen my position in the eyes of the all-knowing YouTube algorithm, and that ultimately helps me direct more of my attention and more of my energy into providing free content here on YouTube. I actually would love to get to a place where I post 2 videos per week on YouTube, but it's not entirely feasible at the moment. But if I can grow this channel that much more, then maybe I can fulfill that dream and make even more content for you guys. Because I have easily 400 videos idea in a spreadsheet on my computer. It's just a matter of having the time and energy and wherewithal to do them all. So that's just my question for you. My ask is that if one of my videos has ever helped you, if you could share it and spread the word in whatever forum or Reddit thread that you see fit, then that would be tremendously appreciated on my part. So thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all. Go check out SIBO Mistakes. I'm really proud of the new series. Definitely new and improved. And now I'm just gonna take a quick peek at some of the new comments coming in because some of you are just so sweet. Yeah, and somebody said, "Thanks so much for answering my question. I really appreciate it. You're welcome." Absolutely. And oh, somebody said, "Your content is what heals us." Yeah, I mean, when you know better, you can do better. right? And Lord knows there's a lot of incorrect information and false information in the IBS, SIBO, dysbiosis, candida kind of gut health space. So I hope that I could be the voice of reason and the voice of scientific truth and ultimately give you the tools that you need to feel better. So thank you so much for tuning in, guys. I'm going to go probably pee, to be honest, because I have been hydrating, as you guys should too. Anyway, happy spring. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you on the next live stream or the next Instagram live stream. Toodaloo.